Okay, so what happens after we die? Now, first of all, I just want to address straight away, this is a controversial subject. It just means people disagree strongly on this subject. People disagree because it really matters to a lot of people. This subject matters to a lot of people. It deals with beliefs that really are at the heart, at the center of people's entire lives. And so I understand that when we talk about this subject, it's very easy. If you divert at all away from people's beliefs, people can get very offended um, and even insulted. People don't like it. So I want to make it clear, I'm not here to try to offend people. And if I do offend people, um, it makes me sad. I like to make people happy. Those of you that have been to my morality sessions know that morality to me is about raising people's emotional wealth and not decreasing it. So I do apologize if I offend anybody. That's not my goal. I try very hard to be respectful towards everybody's different beliefs. But at the same time, I think that truth is important. And I think people come to my sessions because I speak what I consider to be the truth. And so it's those truths that I would like to get to today. Now, if what I'm saying doesn't seem right to you, it's okay. I'm not here to try and convince people. I can't offer people proof of anything in a Zoom meeting. But what I can tell you is what has been proved to me. And I will explain why. And hopefully in that explanation process, some of the things I say might make sense to you. Now, if what I'm talking about, the way I'm doing this, if people feel like, I'm maybe not getting as much out of this as I would have liked, it's completely okay for people to decide to just kind of head off. Please don't feel bad about just saying, okay, I'm going, or just leaving without saying anything. That's completely fine. I won't be offended, and I will completely understand. Now, when I talk about all my subjects, I try very hard to distinguish between what I know, what has been proved, and what I think is probably true or possible. So I pick my words, I use my words very carefully. I don't tend to use the word believe when I'm talking about myself, and people that have been to my thinking sessions understand why that is. So I'm going to try to, everything that I say, I will try to say what level of certainty I have with respect to these things, because I don't know everything. And I will, if people ask me a question and I don't know, I'm happy to say I don't know. I prefer to say that than to tell you what I believe, that sort of thing. So the first question that I'm going to ask today is, do humans even have spirits? I mean, that's a pretty big question. Do we have spirits? And I can tell you 100% for certain, absolutely yes, we have spirits. That has been proved. I suspect that most people here already know that or suspect it. And I'm going to go through now some of the pieces of evidence that will support the fact that we do have spirits. Some people see auras around people, and when people see auras, it's fairly easy to prove that what they're seeing is true. They can often see different colors of auras, and the colors of auras are associated with the emotional state of the person, or whether they're lying or telling the truth, that sort of thing. And it's very easy. When I was probably in my 20s, I met somebody that could see auras, and became very convinced very quickly that they were real. So what are these auras? Well, they're a little bit like those halos and things that we see in old religious images. But the auras go around the whole body, and well, science doesn't have an answer for what those are. And so we could say that those are part of the spirit being seen by some people. You can actually use something called Kirlian photography. Kirlian photography is a type of photography which enables you to take photographs of spirits. And this has been known for, I don't know, 50 years or something like this, and there are books out there and pictures out there. If you've ever watched the X-Files and you see that hand with weird sort of arches coming out of it, colors coming out of it, that's a Kirlian photograph. And Kirlian photographs can tell us quite a lot about spirits. Because they show us that people have spirits, and when you're in different mental states, the photographs look very, very different. You can also take photographs of other objects, such as plants and rocks and pieces of metal, just about anything. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but basically Kirlian photography, yes, can prove that we do have spirits. Then, of course, you have the fact that many living humans have contact with dead humans, people whose biological bodies have passed on. And that contact can take the form of ghosts, of seeing some kind of ghostly figure. It can be direct telepathic communication, which mediums or spiritualists or psychics are often very good at. But sometimes regular people can experience that also. Many people, when they're asleep, they have spirits visit them because your mind is sort of more calm. And there are certain states when you're asleep where a spirit can come in and basically superimpose themselves over your brain and communicate with you. I've had all of my grandparents who are deceased. I've had 3 of my grandparents who are deceased come and visit me in my sleep sometimes. My dog, who I had a long time ago, comes and visits me whenever I'm feeling upset. And they're distinctly different than just regular dreams. But with psychics and mediums, the experiences they have, if you research them, they can logically prove that what they are experiencing is real. There's a wonderful show that I really like called Psychic Kids, and I don't know where it's playing now, where it's available, but I recommend watching Psychic Kids. It's low key. It's not all sensationalistic like some shows are, but every once in a while, when they're investigating children who can see spirits, they will say things that they couldn't have known any other way other than talking to a dead person. And when you have 3 or 4 spirits, 3 or 4 people all seeing the same thing, a bit like how we did with the alien, for 6 people all hearing basically the same name, when you have a few different people all experiencing the same knowledge and information which has come from a spirit, you can prove it. You can prove that that's real. So I have no problem saying I know that spirits are real. I've also experienced sleep paralysis. Do people want to wave their hand if they've experienced sleep paralysis ever? Okay, a lot of people experience this. And even though, medical doctors will, knowing how common this is, they like to give a scientific reason for it, and they have this scientific explanation, which is reasonable enough, but it doesn't explain all of the things that go on in sleep paralysis. And those of you that have had it may well have been convinced that you're actually communicating with a spirit of some kind. So there's a lot of evidence, and I would say proof, for humans having spirits. Then the next question I'm going to ask is, well, what else has spirits? Is it just humans? I've already kind of inferred an answer to that by saying my dog visits me sometimes, who has passed away. Animals have spirits. Only yesterday, somebody said that they, was it yesterday or the day before? When we, in that Wednesday meeting, when I invited the aliens to make a sound in people's houses, one person immediately heard a thump on their table, and they thought, well, that's either an alien or one of their deceased cats who visits her quite a lot. People tell me about this sort of thing a lot, that there are spirits of animals out there. And there's a lot of proof for that. Also, animals have spirits. And why wouldn't they? Because biologically, they are almost identical to us. We're smarter in some respects, more clever in some respects, but biologically, all mammals are essentially the same, biologically. So humans, yes. Animals, yes. What about plants? Now, this is an interesting one. If you do Kirlian photography, first of all, I don't recommend going out and trying to buy a Kirlian camera, because they use ridiculous huge voltages that would blow up all the electricity in your house and probably kill you at the same time. You need to like be in a special lab in order to set one up. But what they did with Kirlian photography, they did some interesting experiments where they took, for example, a leaf. They would take a photograph of this leaf, and you saw the leaf-shaped aura around the outside of the leaf in the photographs. Then they'd go away and they'd snip a bit off the leaf, and they'd come back and they'd take another photo, and the whole spirit leaf, or some of the whole spirit, would still be present. It's like you've taken away some of the matter, but there is still some spirit left in there. So it's pretty much been proved with Kirlian photography that there is spiritual matter within a leaf, within plants. With Kirlian photography also, you can go further than that, and you can look at completely inanimate objects. NASA actually tested Kirlian photography on components, and they realized that they could actually see fractures that were present that they could not detect in any other way. It was as though the extruding spiritual components of that matter had a defect which they were able to pick up on. There was a case where a crime, I don't know if it was solved. I read about it a long time ago. I can't remember the details, but there was a gun, and they wanted to identify where the gun had come from. And this gun had had its serial number filed off. And they used Kirlian photography, and the spiritual signature of the serial number on the gun was still photographable, and they were able to get that. So all living and non-living things have spiritual components, some kind of spiritual matter. Now, our knowledge of spiritual matter is very, very limited. So we know that it's there. We don't know if it is a category of, like we have many different subatomic particles of matter. It could be that spiritual matter has many different spiritual particles. I don't know that. I don't think anybody knows that. But what we do know is that it's not regular matter. It doesn't behave like regular matter. So it deserves to have its own name. And as far as I can tell through my own research, it's never been given a name. So I named it a long time ago, Coretha. Coretha. And those of you that come to my sessions know this word, Coretha. It's very important to distinguish between Coretha and the energy that it has. We talk about energy when we talk about spirits quite a lot. the energy of a spirit or the chi, things like that. But nobody else, to my knowledge, has ever distinguished between the energy and the spiritual matter. And I think it's important that we start to introduce new terminology to describe things. Otherwise, we're forever going to be talking, anything spiritual is going to be energy or frequency. And it's just, reality is more complicated than that. So I'm sure there's a lot of questions that people are having at the moment, and I'm sort of jumping around between these questions. And in a few minutes, they're going to start to all sort of come back on themselves to answer some of the questions you probably have. Let me ask the next question. Where do spirits come from? So this is a really important question. And in order to answer it, I'm just going to summarize, first of all, what are the things we do know right now about spirits? We know that all living and non-living things have spiritual components. In other words, spiritual matter is not special. In fact, it could be everywhere in the spirit realm. It could be attached to every single piece of matter, but it is a pervasive element of the spirit realm. And spirits are just when it accumulates in a biological or inanimate object. Living things and non-living things have spirits that match their physical forms, their size, and their shapes. The spirits of an organism change over time in size and shape to match their physical hosts. That's important, and we can see that in spiritual communication with deceased people, also with Kirlian photography. So what we're building up here is a picture of spirits and biological bodies growing together from right from the start of life. When we have a sperm fertilizes an egg, they've already got spiritual components, and each new cell, each new molecule, or even atom, perhaps even proton or electron that comes in and adds to that, it's got a spiritual component, and you grow your spirit with the biological life form. So this is important that I'm saying this clearly, because that goes against the idea of having ready-made, pre-made whole spirits that are put into an empty vessel. Another thing we know is that the physical and spiritual components of us, of anything in the universe, the physical and spiritual components are bound together somehow. There is a force between them. Now, that might not seem important, but because I'm a scientist, to me, that's important, because there is a force holding our spirits into our bodies. There's a force holding the spirits inside leaves or plants or rocks or pieces of metal. There is a force there. And we don't know what that force is. I mean, I don't know what that force is. What, interestingly enough, 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was announced in CERN, the particle accelerator, that there are indications that scientists may have discovered, they've discovered an inconsistency in the decay of certain subatomic particles, which indicates a lack of knowledge about how that happens. And it's either going to end up being that we discover a new force from that, which would be a big deal, or a new particle. So, I've been saying this a long time, but CERN is a good place to watch, because if you're interested in learning about extra normal things, because they're also delving into extra dimensional spaces. They will collide particles together. The products explode outwards, and they look very carefully to see if any of those particles are disappearing into extra dimensional spaces, or reappearing from extra dimensional spaces. And this is real science. If you look at the leading theories that scientists are proposing to explain the unknown things about the universe, most of those leading theories are predicting up to 10 different spatial dimensions. So that's a good place to be watching. But we also know that spirits have electromagnetic properties. It could be that the spirit and the biological are somehow kept together by some component of electromagnetic forces. Electromagnetic force meters are things that many people take with them when they go doing paranormal investigations or when they go to CE5 events, because they know that if something spiritual comes in, then you can detect that often with an EMF meter. It's actually very good that there is this force between the spiritual and the biological, because otherwise you might just sort of walk accidentally out of your spirit, or with the motion of the earth around the sun, all of our spirits would be left behind and life would not be possible. So it's necessary for that force to be there. So we also know that this electromagnetic forces or fields are involved because of how we can see or perceive or communicate with spirits or ghosts. If you see a ghost, sometimes you see it, but the person standing next to you doesn't. And what you're seeing often is not visible. You're not seeing it with your eyes, you're seeing it with your brain. What is the mechanism behind that? It's simply electromagnetic fields, and this has been pretty much proved to me. You can actually simulate that sort of hallucination by putting electromagnetic fields around a biological brain. It causes hallucinations. You can cause the brain to do weird things if you simply put magnetic fields, wobble them around, wobble magnets around close to your head. If they're strong enough, it can change your emotional state. It can make you hallucinate. Now, many doctors will take that fact to tell people that are experiencing things that are supernatural or extra normal, that it's just magnetic fields, it's a hallucination, it's not real. But the explanation that they fail to see is, well, if you're a spirit with electromagnetic properties and you're trying to communicate with a living person, how are you going to communicate with them if they can't see you with their eyes? Well, what you do is you go down and you take your mind, you put your electromagnetic modulations into their brain, and it's that causes the hallucination of whatever the message is you're trying to put across to the biological organism. Anyway, maybe I'm getting too scientific here, I'm not sure. So if I was to summarize this about, where do spirits come from, the picture we're getting is that there's this pervasive, abundant spiritual substance, charitha, that is all around in extra dimensional spaces, at least the extra dimensional spaces surrounding our three-dimensional physical realm. It attaches itself to all physical matter, thus giving everything spirits. And when living things, biological things are growing, you are also having the spirit grow with it. And that's good, and that's important, because that essentially means that you're making a copy of everything that makes you in spiritual form. And that's how we can survive in the same form when we die. So let's talk about consciousness. What is it? How does that form? Consciousness, or sentience, is being aware That's what consciousness is, being aware. And that's aware of anything around you, being aware of oneself, being aware of one's environment. That being aware is something, it's very hard to prove that anybody's aware other than yourself. I think, therefore I am. If you are thinking, then you are aware, you're conscious. But I can't prove that you're conscious, and you can't prove that I'm conscious. But it seems to be, by the way we all behave, that we probably are all conscious. Now, being conscious or aware is more than merely sensing something and reacting to something. Computers can sense things if you put sensors on them, and they can respond to that sensory input by doing things. Plants can do the same thing. They can, even though they're more advanced than computers, they're alive, they can sense things. They can sense where the light is, where the heat is. They can move their leaves and their flowers, and they can respond to sensory inputs. But consciousness is going beyond that. It's beyond mere sensing. It is being aware. To be aware, to be conscious, you have to have sufficient complexity. You can't have just a magical blob that is a spirit with no structure, with no complexity, or a brain that with no structure. It requires complexity, it requires structure. And to be conscious, it's not just that it's complex, it has to be the right kind of complexity, the right kind of structure. Now, it's very easy to investigate consciousness in humans because there's a lot of humans. And we know from our investigations, from simple observations, that on our planet, it is brains or the central nervous system or the equivalent of that has sufficient complexity and the right kind of structure to enable consciousness to exist. And, you know, there's so many things. We know so much about the brain. A lot of what we know about the brain comes from injuries, when brains accidentally become injured, or when people have done lobotomies in the past, or brain surgery, what the effects are. We know that our consciousness resides in the brain. It also resides in the spiritual components of the brain, which is not generally known by science, but that is also true. That consciousness there is biological and spiritual. So you have that sort of double complexity. We know that if we accidentally cut off a finger, we don't lose a bit of our consciousness. That finger is not lying on the table going, put me back on your hand. It's not conscious. It's not aware. It's a very complex structure with nerves and things running throughout it, but it doesn't have its own independent brain. It's not self-aware. Biologically, humans are animals. We're in the animal kingdom, and you know, any biologist that knows anything about the biology of animals and humans, it's very, very similar. It's identical in most respects, other than size, arrangement, and the intelligence of a human brain. But they have brains. Animals have brains. They have consciousness. That has been proved. Now, some people don't like that has been proved scientifically, but it has been proved scientifically. It's been proved that there's so much about the psychology of animals that's been proved. It's been proved that when you drop a living lobster into a pot of boiling water, it feels pain. So a lot of these things have been scientifically proved. Plants have spirits. Are they conscious? Well, they have life. That just means they are able to naturally self-perpetuate themselves, but they don't have those things that are within a human or an animal that result in the human or the animal being conscious. Plants do not have this. Now, I have a lot of people argue with me. Plants feel pain. Plants are conscious, living things. But those people don't. I mean, it's a nice thought. It's a nice thought. Isn't it nice that a plant, a living thing, has consciousness, and then you can talk to it. It could be like a friend to you. It's nice. It feels nice, but it's simply not true. There is not sufficient complexity, and there's not the right kind of complexity for it to be aware of itself. The structure isn't there. Then people ask me, well, could it be that plants have even a low level of consciousness? I could imagine that if you were to remote view with a plant and you were to try and sense what, I've not actually tried this, but if you were to try to sense what is that plant thinking or feeling, you're not going to get any thoughts because it doesn't have the structure for thoughts. You might get the tiniest hum of background noise, but can we call that awareness? I don't think so, not under the definition of, oh, I'm awake, I'm thinking. There's not going to be any thought. So I don't think that plants having a consciousness is something that we could say yes to. I'm going to now talk about something which is controversial because it's fashionable now. It's a very strong belief now in the UFO and CE5 community to be talking about the idea of one consciousness. We're all the same consciousness. But I think it's very important that we think carefully about how we use words, what those words mean, because every word has a specific meaning. So let's think about what is reality first before we answer that question. You don't know what I am presently conscious of. You don't know what I'm thinking, feeling, and perceiving. You are not perceiving my consciousness in the same way that I am. Is anybody going to disagree with that and tell me they do know everything that I'm thinking, feeling, and perceiving? Awesome.
Yes, I am. Sorry. It depending on what level you are, but whenever you think, if I'm connected to you and whatever you think, I get the emotional input, and within that, I see your pictograms, whatever is going on in your mind. So I'm fully consciously aware of what's going on in your mind and your body if I choose so. You understand that?
Yeah, can you tell me what am I looking at?
No, because I'm fixing my dog right now.
Okay.
But I'm saying that if you do that, yes, in one-on-one, that's basically it, But right now, your mind is everywhere because you have a big recording that you're doing now, got a meeting. So what your mind is not just right now here or what you have, but you're also on the next point, the next point, the next point until this meeting is over, where you can go, that was a good meeting. But you get the intensity right now going, but you have this feeling inside your stomach, going, well, maybe I should talk with her afterward.
So I think I think what you might be describing is the next point I'm coming to. I would have to say, I asked you to prove that you are experiencing my consciousness, and you haven't. You can't tell me anything that's in front of me. So I would have to say, right now, we're not part of the same consciousness. Can you connect to my consciousness on some tiny level? Absolutely. I think that's absolutely possible. We do it all the time. We remote view all the time, and we connect. But connecting to something is different to being conscious of the same thing all the time. I don't have the same awareness as all of the people who are in this Zoom session. You don't. You can connect to it in a small way, spiritually, psychically. Yes, you can connect to it, but you don't have the same consciousness. We are not one consciousness. As lovely as that term sounds, we're not one consciousness, because consciousness means being aware. And you're not aware of what I'm thinking. I'm not aware of what you're thinking. We're not the same consciousness. So when people are using the term one consciousness, it's incorrect use of those words. Now, what I would therefore say is, I think what you were describing, certainly what I do in my meetings where we remote view, is we connect our consciousnesses to other consciousnesses. We connect to a network of other consciousnesses. So I would say we're not one consciousness, but we are all part, or we can be part of, if we choose to be, part of a universal consciousness network. So to me, though, that's an important distinction between terminologies. And I find that to be an important distinction. It's analogous to us being like individual computers that are connected to other computers via the internet. We are different computers, and we can have different things on our hard drives, some of which may be kept to ourselves, some of which may be accessible. It's interesting when you communicate with aliens, sometimes they let you see everything and communicate openly, and they will show you what's in their UFO or habitat. Sometimes, very often though, they don't want you to see everything, and they will let you see maybe their hand, maybe their face and nothing else. But sometimes they choose not to let you be part of their consciousness or even connect to it. So I think it's important to use our words correctly. The next question I'm going to ask is, how do I remain conscious after I die? I think I've already answered that. Over the course of our lives, the spirit brain grows with our biological brain, attaining the same size and shape and structure and complexity. Then when we die, when the biological brain turns off, our spiritual brain, our whole spirit detaches and moves into extra dimensional space, because the biological body is like an anchor to the three-dimensional realm, and our spirit can detach from that more easily, completely, and that's an exact copy of you. It's not a copy of you, it is you. It retains, your spirit is part of you now, and your consciousness is not just in your biological brain, it's also in your spiritual brain. And that structure remains, so that when you die, that structure continues and your consciousness remains the same. That's why ghosts and spirits of departed people retain the same personalities, the same character traits, the same faults, the same memories, the same emotions that they had before. They are the same people. When we die, we are not, it's just going to be our body die, and we are going to continue. Now, that's a really nice thing to think about, but I never choose my reality based on what I consider to be nice. I choose my reality based on what I consider to be true. And I can tell you that it's been proved to me absolutely that when we die, we remain fully conscious with unaltered personality, memories, and emotions. We continue to live. So if there's one positive message that I would want to give to people here, that's it. And all of your friends and family who have died in the past, they also continue to live, and we will all see them again one day when we die. That's to me, that's fact. So where do I go after I die? Where do we go after we die? There is, if you look at all of the different cultures, all the different religions, all of the way around the world, they all have spiritual encounters with people in their family who have passed away. and those people retain the same cultural and religious beliefs that they had before. There's no discrimination in the spirit realm. So I know that goes against what some people believe, but the fact is that all spirits of humans and animals and aliens, they continue to live when they get to the spirit realm. There's no one religion that wins at the cost of all of the other ones. During near-death experiences, people are most commonly met by family or friends. It feels like a very inviting, warm, loving place. And it would do, because when you're a spirit, you can remote view easily. You can pick up on your spiritual perceptions very easily. There is kind of a transition period where you go through, where you're trying to adjust to all of these different emotions, but all these different perceptions. But you can more easily access the feelings, the emotions, the conscious thoughts of spirits after you die. And so you do get this flood of positive emotion. Being a spirit also, you don't have any inertial mass. Inertial mass is the thing that prevents us from traveling backwards and forwards through time. In some of my sessions that I host, we do timeline manipulation using our psychic desires. And it's very easy to prove that the time travel of psychic information or spirits is possible. You can remote view backwards and forwards in time. In other words, spirits know when you're going to die. Your friends and family who are waiting in the spirit realm for you, they know when that's going to happen, and they will be there waiting for you. And you will be invited into the spirit realm by them. You will then have a lot to learn, because you've entered a whole new realm of extra dimensional space, and everything's different, and you've got a lot of learning to do. So you go through an education period. You have to learn the rules or the laws of that, the population of spirits where you're going to go to. Now, I don't have any first-hand knowledge of the geography of the spirit realm, so I'm telling you I don't know that, but it does seem to be that the spirits of people that have passed away stay close to the communities in which they lived. And while I don't have any proof of that, it seems most reasonable that what's going to happen is when you die, you will simply go into be welcomed into the local region of the spirit realm where you are, or by your family and friends, and you will live in a region of the spirit realm, which is essentially a continuation of the cultures that have been in that area or for thousands of years. So its geography, its geographical population layout is very likely to resemble that of our physical communities here. Now, overcrowding isn't really a problem that happens in extra dimensional spaces, because you have extra dimensions of spaces. So every cubic meter of space here in our three-dimensional realm has an infinite extra dimension of space in the spirit realm. So
can I ask a question?
Yes.
In that regard? Well, it's funny. The thing is, let's say a person lives in one point on Earth his entire life, and then he flies to somewhere else, another point on Earth, and accidentally he dies, but he's in a different geographical place. Then how does it meet what you just mentioned? Because he's in a different geographical position.
You can travel anywhere in the spirit realm very quickly. When we remote view, we can travel to other planets in seconds. So when you die, you can choose where to go. your family and friends are most likely to come and welcome you wherever you die. They know where you're going to die, and then in an instant they can take you to wherever they reside. And I imagine, I mean, I don't know what the laws and rules in the society will be when you get there, but I imagine you are then free to decide to live with your family or go off by yourself. But I also imagine you're going to want to be educated first before you do that, in a similar way to what happens here. So, there's not the restriction of not being able to travel places easily. We won't need airplanes or vehicles to do that. I want to talk about reincarnation, because this is a big, big thing, a big, big question. And again, I apologize if I go against people's beliefs here, but I'm going to tell you what the evidence points to. There is plenty of evidence for something happening with reincarnation. But what exactly is the evidence, and what exactly can we deduce from it? A good number of people have a small number of memories about what seem to be previous lives, and in some cases have been proved to be lives of somebody that lived. But most people don't, and those who do only have a small number of memories. So what we're not getting is a full continuation of consciousness, going from one life into another life. So is this really fitting in with, because our consciousness is basically who we are, and if that's not going, if that's somehow being forgotten, then that structure is being lost. That's no longer us. So what we're not seeing is a whole existing spiritual consciousness going into an empty biological body and somehow filling it up and making it their own. The idea of the reason for reincarnation happening is so that you can learn things in each life and take that knowledge with you. Well, that's wrong, because we don't remember. And if the things that people do remember are not that significant. So people like to put purpose into everything and put their beliefs into that purpose. But there's simply the evidence. There's not the evidence to support the idea that whole spirits, when they die or after they die or at some stage in the future, just get inserted into new bodies. That's not what we see. The evidence doesn't support that. But there is something happening. So what is happening? Well, we can find a clue to what might be happening when you look at specific examples of reincarnation that happens in people like the Dalai Lama. So it's believed by many people that the Dalai Lama is reincarnated, but they don't just look for the reincarnated spirit of the Dalai Lama in one child. They look in a few children, and different aspects of the Dalai Lama is believed by them to have been reincarnated into different children. And that's actually a very interesting thing to note, because adult spirits don't fit into embryonic humans. So it's an impossibility. It just doesn't make sense. It's a nice idea. The idea of reincarnation is a nice idea, but it doesn't make sense. But something is happening. So what is happening? With the Dalai Lama, he could be doing, there are mechanisms for him being able to reincarnate himself in the way that he does. And one of those mechanisms is that he could literally, when a baby is growing, developing, he could literally put his spiritual mind into the developing brain of a newly forming baby and use that force between spirit and biology to mold the biological brain of that growing child to have some of the elements of his consciousness. That's like a copying across into a baby's brain. There is another kind of less pleasant idea, and that is that in some kind of in a sacrifice, kind of a spiritual surgery ceremony, he can be cut up spiritually, and bits of his spiritual brain could be put into the growing biological brains of different children. That's also another mechanism. In other cultures, there may be other mechanisms, which again might not sound as appealing as the traditional way of looking at it, but one of those mechanisms is possession. Possession is something that can really happen. You can get spirits, some good, some not so good, possessing people. And when you're an adult and you have a strong mind, it's easy, relatively easy, to just push away that presence, that being. But when you're a child, it's not that easy. And it could well be, I think it's actually quite likely, that a lot of cases of reincarnation is where a baby has had in their past a spirit try to possess them. Now, this could be done in a way that could be considered positive in the culture of the spirits. That is, that their ancestors wishing to pass on some aspects of their knowledge to their great-great-great-grandchildren or whatever. But it could also be spirits who don't have the best of intentions. They just want to be able to feel a biological body again. And that baby can't do anything about it. So there are different mechanisms involved in reincarnation, and those fit the facts. What doesn't fit the facts are the idea of a whole spirit that's already formed trying to somehow be put into an empty vessel, because you don't get empty vessels, and those vessels grow over the years from 2 cells upwards. So I would say that reincarnation then could be considered to be a cultural decision or an individual's decision of a spirit, and not a universal system. We don't have to be reincarnated later in life. And nobody here, to my understanding, has been reincarnated in terms of having been a complete spirit in their past. I want to talk about spiritual healing. How does spiritual healing work? As with everything, there's got to be a mechanism to it. Now, I do spiritual healing. A lot of people do spiritual healing. We can do it remotely, or we can do it in person. When you're in person, you can apply your spiritual currents and charitha and energies more directly. People call it a number of different things, including Reiki. And spiritual healing does use this force that is between the biological and the spiritual. It uses it manipulates the biological by controlling the spiritual. And there is an effect. So we can control our spirits using our thoughts. It's very easy to control our spirits using our thoughts, far more than we can control our biological bodies. We can temporarily change the location of our spirits. We can change the shape of our spirits. We can change the way it flows. We can command our own spirits to, like, hypothetically, among us, we've got people with injuries. we can build up a structural shape in our minds, a spiritual shape to match the biological ideal, and then the force between the biological and the spiritual will attract the biological into that spiritual kind of structure. So we can set up a spiritual scaffolding around which our biological injuries can heal. So that is something that anybody here can do. Now, we have to understand that all forces have different sizes, different strengths. Sometimes a magnetic force will beat a gravitational force. You know, it depends on the situation and the device, but all forces, some forces win, some forces lose. Just because we can heal doesn't mean we can do impossible things. The spiritual force has a strength, and it's not that strong. If it was strong, we could do telekinesis to a very noticeable extent, and we can't. So we have to understand that this is a small force that can act on a small level. It also has to do a little bit with psychic timeline manipulation by anticipating what you want to happen in the future. So it's more than one mechanism, but we can use that force to heal. And that's if we do it every day in the same place, in the same way, that healing can add up over time. Also, as well as just sort of healing a biological injury, you can actually get spiritual damage done. And there are a number of different ways that this can happen. It can happen because of our lifestyle, because of the food that we eat, because we have negative emotions. It can happen if another entity comes in and causes us spiritual harm. It can be, there are a number of sort of parasitic, negative, transdimensional entities that can come in and do that sort of thing. So we can also heal that spiritual damage. And spiritual damage is easier to heal than biological because spirits are more malleable, but you need to try to do it. You need to have positive emotions and you need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. If you do ever think or feel that you might have some kind of a parasitic entity attached to you that is dark in some way, whether it's just a dark human ghost or whether it's something more similar to a demon, or some people have said that reptilian spirits leech off some people. I don't know if that's true or not. But if you do ever have anything like that, then I recommend talking to somebody who understands this stuff, a medium, a psychic, somebody who can give you the emotional and mental strength to also overcome that particular problem. So I'm approaching the end of this session. I'm maybe 5 to 10 minutes away from finishing, and at that point, I will stop rambling on and let people ask questions if they want to. Contacting aliens. Now, we're all part of this alien group, and I've said before, but we can project our spirits out of our bodies and seek them out. Aliens are much more spiritually knowledgeable and capable and technologically advanced than we are. A lot of people don't think of the spirit realm as having technology, but when you understand your environment well enough, the materials in your environment, you can start to make tools and you can start to make technology. And aliens use technology. At my remote viewing alien events, we ask aliens almost every session, if there's any technology you can give us to help us communicate with you better, then please give it to us. This is something you can do yourself if you remote view aliens. And it's interesting because occasionally the alien will reach out and put something into your spirit hand. And that thing may look a bit like a stone or a disc, and it sinks into your spirit hand and becomes attached to your spirit. And that seems to help people then strengthen their spiritual, their remote viewing skills, and communicate with spirits more easily. There's somebody in Las Vegas who had that happen a couple of months ago. There's somebody in Wales who had that happen last week. And but also aliens have advanced technology, so they do, some of them have the technology to heal us. Now, not all of them care about healing us, but some of them do. And if you ask them, then they may. But they're really only interested in interacting at all with people that they consider to be wise, to be evolved enough to be friends with them. And that's part of my big push that I'm doing with my groups, is I'm trying to raise people's CE5 wisdom in 4 key areas: knowledge, experience, thinking, and morality. And if you can advance your experience, your wisdom in those 4 key areas using the CE5 wisdom chart that is accessible on the Global CE5 website, then we stand a lot better chance of establishing meaningful relationships with aliens, and maybe in having them heal us, if that's one of the things you want. So I'm going to give maybe a closing piece of advice. And my advice would be is act like this is your first and only lifetime living as a biological human. Make the most of it. If I'm wrong and you get many lives, no harm done in living this life to its fullest. But if I'm right, then you might regret it if you end up dying and you haven't lived as fully as you can live, because this may be the last biological human that your consciousness will ever inhabit. So make the most of it. Also, treat it well. We live in a society where we don't, I'm talking about America, but also England to a large extent also, and I don't know about the other countries, Canada, maybe you're more sensible up there, I don't know. But as a society, we treat our bodies so badly. And we're every time we eat food, we're eating the spiritual component of that food. And that spiritual component becomes part of our spirit. If you would like to understand a little bit more about healthy eating, watch the documentary, What the Health? And if you want to learn more about that subject, just send me a message and I'll tell you, because it's important. If I also recommend taking good care of your spiritual body by meditating often, by rejecting darkness from within you. Now, rejecting darkness from within you does not mean turning a blind eye to all of the problems of the world. It's like global warming is this big issue. Oh, but I'm a positive thinker, and if I think positively, then that's not going to happen. No, that's not being wise. Okay, we need to be wise enough to look for evidence of reality, and if there's anything bad happening, to address that, try and overcome that, not ignore it and stick our heads in the sand. By rejecting darkness, I mean from inside you. Whatever you do, try to do it with love, with compassion, with friendship. Try to be a better person by establishing loving and friendly and constructive relationships with humans, with aliens, with animals, with all sentient life forms, because they all have emotions, they all have spirits, and what we do and how we interact matters to all of us and to us individually.